we discuss all things of Earth and outer space, where we divine to pass the time, and no one can put us down or in our place. Grab your tea leaves or your spirits and gather around. The embers are glowing, warm flames abound. The hallowed hearth welcomes you now.
For centuries, humanity has used two very different languages to describe the lights in the dark. Science calls them cosmic anomalies and craft in the sky, but the ancient traditions call them spirits, intelligences, and powers summoned through ritual. Tonight on the Hallowed Hearth, our UFO month takes a dark, fascinating detour to the crossroads where modern sky mysteries meet ancient magic. Rachel Haley and I are opening the circle for Salem witch, author, and practitioner Christian Day. We're asking the hard questions. Are the entities in the night sky coming from distant galaxies? Or have practitioners been opening gates to them right here on Earth for centuries? Draw your chair close to the flames, because tonight, the veil is impossibly thin. And as I mentioned, I have my co-host with me, the beautiful Haley Hansen. Hello, dear sister. And coming to us remotely, virtually, live from the fabulous New Orleans is Rachel Ravensdale. Hello, sister.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. Really good. I had a drink in hand. And I'm at Muriel's. It's in Jackson Square in the French Quarter of New Orleans. And it happens to be a haunted restaurant. We're upstairs.
Of course it is.
We're upstairs. They have a seance lounge where the spirit that resides here actually died in the place. And they have a table set all the time for the ghost, because if they don't, bad things happen.
Oh, wow.
The opera, leave space for the ghost.
Always.
Exactly. They were smart because they knew that if they didn't, like, things move around the restaurant.
Oh.
Yeah.
So they keep it like permanently like that. If you hear all the noise, sorry guys, like, it's a happening place.
Yeah.
It was quiet until we started, and then everybody is around. So if you need to, like I said, mute me.
Well, we'll see. Right now, we're getting just you, so that's great.
Awesome.
But let's see. Let's use Keith since he's with you tonight, and we'll see if the ghost will come through him to pick our card.
Okay, Keith.
So Keith, I'm going to start shuffling. You, that one tried to jump. Tell me when
You get to do it. Hi.
Open the camera, Keith. There you go.
Hi, Keith. All right, tell me when to stop. You feel cold. Oh, well, that one just flew away. So
You don't get to stay anyway. That's a problem.
you don't even get to choose. The card said no.
And back to
We got the knight. We got the Knight of Cups.
Ooh, a night. Have we had a night before?
We have not.
Are you?
Ooh.
Oh, this is definitely for us. Romanticize the present moment every chance you get.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Romanticizing.
Okay. So, Knight of Cups. It's a great day to fall in love with everyone and everything, isn't it? In some readings, this card will represent a teenager or perhaps a young adult. But in most of your readings, you'll find that it probably represents the type of person who never fails to captivate everyone around them with their enchanting personality. This person sees life through a lens of longing and may express their feelings through writing, painting, music, or perhaps grand gestures of affection. If this represents you, then remember to safeguard your precious heart. If this is a person in your life, then be careful with their precious heart for as long as it's in your hands.
Ooh, I like that.
That's so sweet.
I know.
I think that almost represents each one of us.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was definitely for us. So, a message coming through from New Orleans.
Nice try, Keith. No, we love our
Oh,
supporters.
okay.
And also, thank you real quick to everyone in the comments already. We got so many people tuned in tonight.
I know. This is
That's
this is really
awesome.
hard to keep up with tonight.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to get everybody on the screen if you comment. If I don't, please be patient with me.
Of course, Holly's there. Holly.
Yes. All right. Well, without further ado, Rachel, you have an earlier connection with our guest tonight. So tell us a little bit, and then we'll bring him on and let him tell us the rest.
Gosh, I almost think he needs no introduction. He's pretty incredible. I know author, warlock here in both New Orleans and Salem, has stores in both locations. Practitioner for a long time. So, yeah, Christian Day, come on.
Hello.
Hello. I'm just going to move everybody around a little bit, but how are you? Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, you're most welcome. I'm just like sending this out again to my peeps on the socials here, hoping they come listen. Is there a chat people can go in?
There is, absolutely. Hello, Cynthia. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, on
Yes.
YouTube there would be.
On
Yeah.
YouTube. Yep. They can go right into the live chat. It is delayed a few seconds. So if you don't see your comment right away, it is coming.
Oh, fantastic. Let me bring up the
And Rachel, I did mute you for a second. So just wave at me if you.
She's a professional. She's got this.
Oh yeah, she's all over it. But this is a pretty popular place, so I'm not surprised. Oh, we got all kinds of people jump in and say, hey, gorgeous girls. Hey, thanks, Melinda.
Oh, I see Cynthia. I see Sean Day here. There's a few I know.
Yeah, we've got lots of folks. So Christian, Rachel told us a little bit about your background, but kind of tell us how you, I don't know, fell into witchcraft or how you discovered that you were drawn to the craft.
Yeah, felon is probably a good term to use. I think I was 15. I was, and I had, I thought for the longest time it was my aunt that did it, but it was actually her friend, who was my father's girlfriend at the time. My father's girlfriend was reading tarot cards, and I thought it was fascinating. What is this? For whatever reason, I just never happened across them. I didn't know what they were. So she said, well, you're not old enough to do this. So when I was 17 and I had a job flinging burgers at McDonald's, I went out and got a deck of tarot cards. And then when I was 18, my mother had a friend she was hanging out with who said to me, I'm a witch. I'm like, thinking, Stevens, I don't know. No idea.
What's she talking about?
Right. And so, she told me to go to Pyramid Books in Salem, which just closed after, God knows, 40 years in Salem, and bought some books and things like that. And it just went from there. I didn't know that I had any psychic ability. I read tarot cards, and I would learn not only the meanings of cards, but the meanings of the various symbols in the cards. But it wasn't until I took Lori Cabot's Witchcraft 1 class, which you can still take, by the way. Like, she teaches it online. She's doing it with Paul Mercerl, who, because she's 93, she's still going. And, so I took Witchcraft 1. And it really, along with my witchcraft initiation that came much later in life, was one of the two most magical life-changing experiences, because I learned very quickly that we all have psychic ability. We all have the power to draw from within, to pull energy from outside our bodies and process it through the power of the brain and become more psychic. And everyone in this class was just spectacular. I mean, you had people from, beauty pageant contestants and nurses and just, people from all walks of life that had no sense of their own psychic power. And there's one thing I'm a priest of the Alexandrian witchcraft tradition, but I'm also very devoted to Laurie. And something that I will say that her tradition, the Cabot Kent Hermetic Temple, does so well is gives you a foundation of psychic ability. So many witchcraft traditions and witches out there will say, I'm not psychic. Well, to me, practicing magic without psychic ability is like using a PlayStation with the television off. Now, your controller's probably vibrating, so you get some sense you're doing something, but you can't see or hear any feedback, and you're probably getting your ass kicked. So I feel like, to have a psychic skill in your repertoire is crucial to magic. And then there are psychics, so you get the other side. Well, I'm psychic, but I wouldn't touch magic. That's evil. It's like, well, okay, you can draw in energy, but you don't take any responsibility for what you send out. That's a little strange.
Yeah.
Point.
Oh my gosh. I'm enamored with you already.
What someone is. I remember.
I'm just like, just keep talking to me, Christian.
I'll never forget. It was like 30 years ago. Streisand went on Oprah, I think it was. And Oprah's like, well, I don't mean to fawn. And Barbara's like, no, fawn.
Please do.
The New York Times just ripped me. Well, because I get so many haters. It's like, oh my God, somebody said something nice.
Yeah, I'm just like falling in
We
love.
were you already. You're not going to get any hate here, and if so, we're going to. Baba Yaga's entered the chat. That's fun.
Oh, I'm so excited for that new show. There's a show called Yaga. Oh, it looks so deliciously creepy.
Oh, look, Melinda said me too, Katie. Yeah, everybody's falling in love with you. Rachel's trying to get my attention. Hi, Rachel.
Jesus, of course, as the truck goes by, everybody else left, so it should be quieter here.
Okay, good.
But my question is, and I kind of know the answer, but I want to hear what your answer is, Christian. So do you think witchcraft chooses us, or do we choose witchcraft?
I think we all have a little witch inside us. I know that's trite, but and it's very practical magic. Practical magic too.
Yes.
It's very practical magic. Everyone has magic. Everyone has psychic ability. Now, do I think that, because remember, and this is, I spent 30 years making fun of initiation only to take the plunge 10 years ago. And I believe it. I do believe that there is magic that bridges all magical religions, from voodoo to witchcraft, ceremonial magic, candomblé, all the different practices that are magical. But a witch, to me, and I'm not criticizing everybody else. I know everybody has their own words. But to me, witchcraft is a priesthood. And so in that regard, yes, I do believe the gods call you. But I also believe witchcraft as a practice of magic that is, I think, naturally religious, because they had other words for magic. When they persecuted people for witchcraft, they weren't just persecuting the magic. It was what they believed we prayed to, whether it was the devil or the queen of Elfame or the man in black or the goddess of the east or whatever. But, to sort of answer that question, I have the two questions I get asked the most. How do you deal with all the haters, and why don't my spells work? Those are the two. The answer is the same. If you are authentic to who you are, if you are doing what you meant to do, like Laurie Cabot always says, can you see me working at IBM? I'm going to upgrade that, update that to today. I mean, does anybody know what IBM is? But can you see me working for Microsoft? It's no, because this is even without the makeup, even without the clothes. I just wouldn't fit, because I fit doing what I do. And because I know what I am, who I am, and what I do, nothing, sometimes it's a distraction. My husband says I let these people get to me more than I should. Sometimes nothing bothers him. They could say anything about him, it just doesn't faze him. Same with Lori Cabot. I'm just like, no. I'm like Ava Perón, please love me. But it is a long lesson to be learned, but ultimately you still do what you do because it's a calling. You don't have a choice. It's like being a nun. You don't have a choice. And when you know you don't have that choice, when you give yourself over to it completely, everything comes into play. The magic. It doesn't mean everything. Nothing's 100%. But as Lori always says, Lori Cabot, if you have a 75% or more success rate, you've created a valid scientific hypothesis. So you are, when you embrace who you are, everything comes together. It just does. When you don't, sometimes we all forget that. I look at, somebody does a competing, not the thing you're at, but, somebody does another witch thing and they're like, we're going to replace Hexfest or whatever. And I'm thinking, oh my God, do I change the price? Or what do I do? Or do I change something? And then I have to come back, whether it's through my own conscience or my husband's nagging, to the fact that we're not doing this because of what other people do. None of you on this show or watching this show, you don't do what you do for these other people. It's that you're doing it because it's who you are. It's what you do.
Absolutely.
So if that's the core of who you are, nothing's haters or failure. God knows, I mean, the amount of failures, and I mean, I've had more comebacks than Cher. It's you have to roll with the pluses and the minuses and the ups and the downs and know that this is who you are and you don't abandon it. And that's key, I think.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, that goes with anything, don't you think, in life that, you feel a connection to, like,
Right.
people are always going to hate.
And
There's
if you
always going to
don't
be those
feel a
haters.
connection to it, maybe it's not for you. I've seen people abandon the craft that probably shouldn't have been there to begin with. They came into it with expectations mainly from other people. Like I learned very early on. I mean, my husband says I do have a sycophant or two here and there, maybe more, but I do avoid that sort of thing because I watched it with Lori Cabot. And where these people would come to her and they'd want to fill this hole within themselves. And so they thought Lori Cabot was going to fill that hole. I'm going to take her classes. I'm going to go to all her rituals. Oh, wait a minute. My hole's still empty. And then they blame her, and suddenly she's got a new enemy. And, they've done it to me. They come to us. They want to fill the hole. But you cannot fill that from without. That has to be something that comes from here, from the soul. And if you're looking everywhere else for that, well, witchcraft may not be for you because it's the ultimate accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Can we have a fun?
So you mentioned. Sorry, go ahead, Haley.
I want to hear about your ghost adventures, please.
Well, Ghost Adventure, it really is one of my favorite stories, especially the second one. The first time I didn't know what it was. And my friend Kelly Spangler, who's a great psychic medium in Salem, she was like, oh my God, Ghost Adventure. I was like, what the hell is this? Well, you got to do it. So I said, well, Kelly, she'd been, working for me for some stuff. And, she'd really been so helpful. So I said, why don't you come on the show? God, were they all mad? All the others. They were all mad. Why aren't you being her? They get very catty sometimes, these psychics, and, but she loved it. So why not, give somebody the dream of a lifetime if that's their favorite show in the world? You know what I mean? And plus, she's a good psychic medium. While I'm a good psychic and I can be a medium, it comes and goes for me sometimes. So I needed I want someone that does mediumship all the time right next to me. So if I don't magnetize those spirits, she does. So I find out that they're going to go to the Lyceum and to the witch house. And I only went to the witch house. It's not haunted. I mean, we made it haunted, but it's not haunted. Now everybody thinks it's haunted. It's not. I mean, every place has some spirits, but the witch trials victims aren't going to hang out there. That was the home of one of the judges. So I said I would do a necromantic ritual, and I get a call from the park and recs who run the house, and they're like, we're very concerned you're doing this necromantic ritual. Can you change this? It's so dark sounding. And I said, tell them I'll do, a witch's blessing instead. Well, what's the difference? They said, absolutely nothing. I'm just changing the name. So I get there, I find out the guys are already locked in the place. Sorry, allergy cough. So I find out they're already in the place. I also find out they're still going to the Lyceum, which is super haunted. It's the most haunted place I go to in Salem. It's now Turner's Seafood. And I'm like, oh no. I am petty sometimes. I don't want to be upstaged. So, I find out they're still going there because I talked them out of it, and now they're going there. So I'm thinking, oh no. So I did this spell, and I grabbed Kelly's hand and I pointed in the direction of the witch house, the Lyceum, and I said, Bridget Bishop, if you've ever felt a connection when I've worked with your spirit at the Lyceum and various events we've done, please give them no audience, give them no show. And so, I didn't think anything more of it. I went in the house. They weren't getting anything till we came in the door. And this was when they only had like one sound guy and them. Like, the second time I was on the show, there was this whole crew, but like this was back in the day, and I get in there and I didn't do anything all that special. I mean, I had Robert the Skull that I have. I pricked my finger with blood. I had spring water. I had honey, things you can read about in the Odyssey. Some of the most powerful magic is right there in literature for us to look at. And we just, feel like we have to overthink it with the Greek magical papyri and ancient languages. And it's like, dude, just bring some honey. And the moment we walked in the door, everything went haywire, all the equipment. And then it called out the name of the skull, Robert. And that made us giggle because I had always thought my best friend Sean, who passed away in 2007, when he bought Robert on eBay, I think from the Bone Room in Los Angeles, and said, he says his name is Robert. And I said, oh, sure, Sean, yeah, whatever. And when they called up Robert's name, I was like, freaking Sean, he was right all along. Then he called out my name, the ghost box. And then they asked what spirit was there. And it said Bridget Bishop. Right. And again, why would she be there? This is the home of one of the judges. But the best part was we had just basically conjured her away from the Lyceum. I didn't ask her to go to the house, to be fair. I just asked her not to be there. And because I wouldn't have been rude. I'm like, I don't want to drag Bridget Bishop to the home of one of the judges. I think that would be rude. But she decided to bless me with her presence anyway. And then when you saw the show, they got nothing. They had to manufacture scenes of, the men at the bar said a box fell down the stairs. So they show a recreation of the box falling down the stairs. It was so ridiculously bad. And I talked to Zach a month later. I said, I noticed that nothing came through. And, we didn't get anything. And I said, well, I have a confession to make. And that I later made that same confession on their Aftershocks interview where, they wanted me to talk about what am I doing with Bridget Bishop now? And I'm like, oh, we're in an affair. We're having an affair. We're getting I don't care about what's going on now. I want to talk about what really happened on that show,
Yeah.
And, like I said earlier, I might be a well-known witch and have my magic and my success, but I have my gay, petty side, like... my gay mind games, I think somebody said. So I have that side to me. And so I'm thinking, well, why can't I be like Lori Cabot when she was in the, I'm not generally a jealous person. I'm just not. I think about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, not other people. But I always have been a little envious because in 1979, Lori Cabot had a picture where there was blue light surrounding her entire coven that they've never been able to explain. And Penny Cabot just told me this afternoon that there were other pictures where there was blue light pouring out of a chalice that Lori was holding. I mean, this was spectacular. I'm thinking, why don't I have that moment where, there's something exciting that I can say, like, look what I did, And so they invited me and Patty Negri, who's there with Rachel at the conference here in New Orleans, New Orleans Paracon, which is wonderful, I'm sure. It starts this weekend if you want to go. And of course, Hacks Fest is next weekend if you want to go, in New Orleans also. And so they invite Patty Negri, who's there, and me to come out and conjure up the spirit of Houdini. Now,
Patty's like, what?
right, I am a warlock. I'm a magical person. I practice witchcraft. I love magic, but I also don't want to be some parlor trick. You know what I mean? There was something sort of cheesy about that. And then I'm like, and then Brian's like, well, I don't want to bring the dog. And, so this is the second time he was able to go on Ghost Adventures and didn't because of the dog. Then the day of, he thought I was going to Los Angeles. I thought I was going to that stage magician mansion or whatever it is. I guess I didn't understand what I was going to. And then the last minute, it's the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose.
Whoa.
So then my husband's like, I've always wanted to go there. I said, well, you're the one that, I'm sorry. And when you ask me that question about a certain rules later, I'm going to tell you why that matters. The rules of being a Salem witch. But the Winchester Mystery House, I didn't know what it was. My husband's like, it's got all those stairways to nowhere, and there's like rooms that just don't end, and stairs and halls.
Oh my God.
Well, I don't know when you were there, but I was there at 1 a.m. getting lost with no lights, and I wasn't the one holding the flashlight, and I'm 6 feet tall with a cape and a hood on, like thinking I'm gonna bang my head every 2 seconds. And so so we go, and the first thing Patty and I do is we're trying to like break into some Asian restaurant that decides to close early, and we're all like, well, wait a minute here, we just like booked the Uber over here. So then we found this other place, and I gotta tell you, the Asian restaurants in San Jose are just next level. So we found the place with the wok with the flames. We're sitting there, and we're like, we've worked together at X-Fest. We've worked together, at WitchCon, but we never did it together, where I was teaching.
No.
So this was new to us. So we were talking, and we were like, well, do we want to each do our own thing? Because they're offering us, we'll film you and then we'll film her. And I'm like, I don't know. I said, I get this vibe that you and I could be like, Hans Holter and Sybil Leek. And this would be like, because she's just so fun. Patty Negri is just so fun and magical and psychic. And so, we decide we're going to do it together. So then we get in, and we're sitting at this table in the Winchester House, and they don't allow candles. So Zach's producer, he's so well put together, and I know he's not gay, but at first I thought because he's so well groomed and everything, I'm like, he's either gay or from Revere, Massachusetts, which is very, very Italian dude. How all the guys from Jersey Shore look like they're probably gay because they're so well groomed. So I didn't know. And I'm not the type to ask. So, but then I knew because I looked down and I saw all those cheesy tea lights with the really fake looking flames. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, and I'm like, Zach, speaking as the gay person in the room, because I knew it wasn't him. I was like, here's this, you need to get rid of these. Yeah, that. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. I don't know that that's the thing I'm talking about. Let me see that again. Oh, yeah, it is. No, you want. Well, the reasons people get those is they're rechargeable, but Luminara makes them, which has that really thin flicker flame that looks so real you can't tell. So, and I was like, you need to get the Luminaras. You got to replace them with batteries. They're not, low rent. You need to do this, so we got rid of all those. We're sitting down. Patty starts reciting these poems she wrote for Houdini, right? And I don't think they showed this on the final show, which was disappointing. It was so amazing because there was this point where Zach said, is this really the spirit of Houdini? And the ovulus, which is like that speak and spell, well, it doesn't speak, but it reads out words based on the radio vibes or whatever the hell. Like, I'm not as up with the science of all this. but it spelled out it put out the words written poem. And it's like, well, hello, there's your validation, and so then they were, before all this, when they're trying to conjure the spirit, they're like, well, we have some floor tiles that Houdini walked on. And I'm thinking, what do you want to do that for? You've got the great grandnephew of Houdini sitting right here. That's your link, or what we would call the river of blood, or the connection to the DNA, or the genetic memory, all of those things that become linked to the spirit. So, I put my hand on George Hardine's shoulder. This is the great grandnephew. And I, plus he does like spirit meditation, which was really cool. So he also helped judge that energy, as did Patty. So I put my hand on the shoulder of George, and I'm like, I just winged it like I always do. I never prep these things like I probably should. And, I'm like, Houdini, if there was any, if anyone could cross the threshold of death, it is you who could break any chains, and, whatever, blah, 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 And so then they put us all in these infrared, I think it's infrared, or was it ultraviolet? I don't know. Ultraviolet, maybe? I don't know. Goggles that would protect our eyes from whatever this was, and they started taking some Polaroids. Well, they liked how everything went. So originally, they weren't going to let us go up into the house. It was just going to be Zach and the people, from the show, and not me, George, or Patty. But they loved what we'd done so far, that they invited us to come up and, mind you, I'm the one with the flashlight. And I'm 6 feet tall. I got this hood and cape, and I'm looking like the Liberace of the dark world, and muddling through this mansion, and trying not to bump my head because it's an old mansion, and the ceilings are a little lower. And finally, we end up in I think it was one of the, looked like a child's room. I don't remember, but it was very, very haunted. Then we ended up in this turret they call the witch hat room, which is the turret of the tower.
Fun.
And Patty started doing this chant. And I couldn't tell you the melody now, but the most magical thing was that, and you can see the chant at the end of the episode, they play it during the credits. Once she started, I knew the words of the chant, and she's doing this chant, and I immediately knew the melody, even though I didn't.
Wow.
And there was a song that had that melody in it by a singer named Gypsy in Salem, and she has, it's but that was not the melody. Patty just launched into the, and I am a singer, but you still have to learn a melody. I just knew it automatically, and instantly, me and her and George were in this circle of power. You could tell that there had been rituals here before, that not just spirit investigation, but actual ritual, and I remember when we had still been downstairs, the ghost box kept saying, because I had said to Zach, I'm like, I don't think it's just ghosts here. There's some malevolent thing that has attached itself, and I don't think it's some ancient native burial ground or whatever, a la Amityville. I said, I think this is something new that is attached. Every once in a while there are entities out there that say, oh, this place looks interesting, and sort of sets up shop. And that's what it felt like to me. Like, this hasn't been here for years and years and years, but it's here now. And he gives me this look like, shut up, we want to talk about Houdini. So I just let it go. And then the ghost box starts saying, darkness, devils, basements, and I'm like, yeah. Don't question the warlock. So we end up getting separated from Zach and his people, and that's when we end up in the witch hat room. So then we have to find our way back. One of the dudes from the show finds us and helps us find our way back at 1 a.m. from the 3rd floor of the Winchester house back to the main floor. So that was an adventure unto itself, with no lights. You know what I mean? Like, all you have is a flashlight. There's no lights on in this place, and we're trapped. So we get downstairs, and the team had beat us by about 5 minutes, and they're looking all excited. So Zach pulls out this, he starts showing us all the Polaroids from ultraviolet or infrared? Does any of you know? What is it you put the No, it would be probably ultraviolet that you'd have to wear goggles. Yeah, that makes more sense. So it was, you wouldn't have to wear that for infrared. So, we had to put goggles on when they had those Polaroids taken. So now they've got the Polaroids developed. And he pulls them out and he's like, look at this, look at this. They're all normal. They're all normal. There might be like a head shake here and there, Then there's this picture and there's light beams bouncing all over the photography, everywhere, all over the room. One of them's forming a pentagram in the air, like you sometimes see occultists draw. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's pretty, it's better than some priestesses I've seen draw. And if you've ever been to an open circle and you don't, are they using a spirograph? Remember those little plastic toys with the pen? And that's their well, Sin Miss Livets in the chat knows what I'm talking about, because we were once at a circle where the guy called east 3 different times. It was north was east was east, and west was east. I think south was west. But anyway, he shows me this, and the beams are all coming out of my hands, going to the rest of the room.
Whoa.
And of course, I'm a super skeptic. So I'm like going around to my paranormal friends going, is this real? Could this be fake? What's this? Because I don't want to go out and make a claim, that I can't back up with facts, which is how I tend to win these battles that come in my direction, because I bring receipts. But anyway, so yeah, I'm all excited. I called my husband after. I said, Brian, I may only be a first-degree Alexandrian priest, but I have Sith Lord powers. So now I got this Sith Lord, basically a Sith Lord with the lightning. And I called up, I hugged Zach too, because I said, I want to thank you. And he hugged me because I said, when I first went on your show, I said, I thought you guys were not treating the spirits well. That's why I kind of put a whammy on them in that first episode that I did tell them about later when I went on Aftershocks. I made them look into the skull, and I was really basically saying, you are now a creature of spirit. This was 2011. And the reason I did that is so that if they were going to screw around, they were going to have to deal with the consequences, and they did evolve, because what I saw in the second episode that I did was such a great respect for those spirits. And so I thanked him, because this is not just some shtick for me. This is my life. So I call, I go over to Lori Cabot's house the next time I'm in Salem. I said to her, does it ever get old? You're 93. I said, does it ever get old when you have that exciting, magical moment? Because I'm 56. It doesn't get old. You know what I mean? I'm still, yeah, you have those moments when something psychic or magical doesn't happen for a little while, and your life gets a little mundane, and then something happens and reminds you of how enchanted the world really is. And I remember she called me with Penny on the phone when the show aired and they saw it, and she said, look what you did. That's what you did. You did that. I saw the science when you put your hand on his shoulder. I saw what you did, and you made this spirit appear with the science of witchcraft. And it was just the greatest thing for me, because this was my National Geographic moment. I said, I finally have something I can say, not just to prove to myself, because I don't really need to prove to other people what I am or who I am, but to prove to people that magic is real. Now you can look at this and you can see, I did this spell and this thing happened. As far as spells on a monthly basis, our coven, meets once a week, though I'm not in Salem as much this year. So, and I'm in the Salem coven. My husband is in the New Orleans coven. So, I don't get to do as much as I'd like. But at the same time, what do you call a spell? I'm always in a magical mindset. I might not always be lighting a candle. I might not always be burning incense, but I'm always thinking in a magical way. If I'm trying to negotiate in a meeting, before that meeting, I'm in alpha. I'm lowering my brainwave. I am entering altered states of consciousness. If it's as long as I need to do, say, I want that person, to agree with what I say. And, sometimes it doesn't work, but every day is magic. Every act can be a magical act. Well, there you go. You know what I mean? It's like the song says, you know what I mean? It's like when you live a magical life, every act is a magical act, but I'm also, when I'm active, I try to meet on Zoom once a week with the high priestess of the Salem coven. Our schedules are insane, so it's not always easy. But we're always studying and learning and absorbing and changing and making magic. It doesn't always have to be, a room full of candles and people chanting. It can be as simple as, I'm at the parking lot of the mall to do some Christmas shopping and there aren't any spaces and I'm zapping up a parking space, and isn't that magic,
Absolutely.
Well, okay, but then that brings me to something that we have alluded to a couple of times tonight. Because while, yes, everything that you can do is magic, and your intentions and all of that, but one thing that like we've talked about with Wicca before, and the difference between like Wicca and somebody who's walking just a left-handed path or working with a craft or whatever, are rules. And what, when does like the craft become a religion, or in that kind of strict, you have to do this to say you're a witch. So you kind of briefly touched on the Salem rules earlier, but can you tell us?
The Salem rules are more of a fun thing, but I want to address what you're saying because there's a mantra that goes around now. I'm a witch, but I'm not Wiccan. And I remember Lori. Well, it's not that simple. Years ago, Lori Cabot put out a video saying, there is no religion of Wicca. The religion is witchcraft. We're witches. We were called witches. And people attacked her because Wiccans attacked her, or neo-Wiccans, initiates wouldn't have got involved with this. But what I called neo-Wicca, when Scott Cunningham appropriated initiatory witchcraft into, I don't even know what it is. It doesn't look anything like what we do, but suddenly that was Wicca all over the world, but it's not. And the word, so people got upset with Cabot that followed that. Well, yes, I am a Wiccan and it is my religion. I'm like, that's not. And I didn't know that, where Lori was coming from at the time. But since then, when my husband was working on his book, Initiation into Witchcraft, I was standing in Eleusis, which is a place of initiation in Greece, outside of Athens. And people would come from all over the world. They could be kings and pharaohs and emperors, and they never turned their nose up at that initiation the way people do now. And I said to Levi Rowland, who's a linguist and very brilliant, used to do Covendom with my husband, and he's a high priest of the craft also. And I said, Levi, wasn't Anglo-Saxon a gendered language? And he said, yes. I said, well, English is not a gendered language, modern English. Anglo-Saxon is Old English. Modern English is, so in other words, Old English is gendered the way they have like señor, señorita, la versus el in Spanish, that are gendered. Oh, well, then the real words behind witch, which they say, if you would read the dictionary without understanding the palliative consonant of the word that people call Wicca, it's actually Wicha or Vicha, Viche is female. Wicha, Viche. So I said, well, would those not actually be gender variants rather than singular words as we might understand them? Aren't we saying Wicha and Viche just to differentiate between male and female? And he said, well, yes. I said, well, you take the gender off and what do you get? Witch. So I had to call up Lori Cabot. Says, when you always said the old word for witch is not Wicca, it's witch. Well, you're right.
Yeah.
Because, when they look at the dictionary, it comes from Wiche and Wiche. The dictionary isn't, no pun intended, spelling that out for you. But when you see it from an etymological perspective, you realize, and when you know Anglo-Saxon is a gendered language, you're talking about the word witch. So when you say I'm a witch, I'm not Wiccan, it's like saying I'm a witch but not a witch. Now, am I saying that initiatory craft or what Gardner gave us is the only thing? No. I will make the argument that I do believe and understand, to the best of my knowledge, that Gardner was the first person to come out and say, I'm a witch, that didn't do so under torture, publicly. Now you've got all, I'm a witch from, I'm a 9th generation Appalachian granny mountain witch from Virginia Beach, and, from somewhere that's not remotely mountainous. And so there's all of this witchcraft of spells. I mean, I think Levi makes a good argument for that because, as I said earlier, when they persecuted magic in ancient cultures, and even the pre-Christian Greeks and Romans would sometimes persecute you because they were afraid of magic. Magic was persecuted as magic. Magic was persecuted as magic separately in Old Britain and Europe. In fact, there were astrologers and magic users in the court of Queen Elizabeth, John Dee. So when someone was persecuted for being a witch, especially in continental Europe, this is why witches were hanged in New England, Salem, in England, because it was not considered heresy. On the continent, it was heresy because you were not only just doing magic, you were worshiping these other gods. Witchcraft, all the way back to its first definition of the trials as an English word, post Wiche, is religious in tone. And then there is a book called The Tribe of Witches by Stephen Yates. Not totally accepted by academia, and even Levi said it's a homophone, which is a word that sounds like another word. Well, that, I love Levi and he's helped me a lot, but I don't agree with him here because it was the Debunny tribe that had the kingdom of the witchy. It was the witchy kingdom, and they had a cauldron goddess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what more do you need? A religious thing. So there is that aspect of the craft. I'm not making the argument that everything Gardner did was some ancient thing, but I don't think it was just spellcraft either. As far as rules, I think it depends. I know Brian loves to say, if you worship, if you believe in the goddess and you're magical, you're a witch, we might not call you a priest or initiate. We aren't as strict about that word as we used to be, some of us. I know even Maxine Sanders isn't as strict about that word as she used to be. But, the word witch. But, I mean, I believe that to be a witch, you have to honor the spirits. You have to honor the land. You have to honor maybe the gods of where you are, but hopefully there's goddess in there somewhere and it is not all male. And there must be magic. If anything, I'm stricter than some of the initiates because there are initiates that I don't see as witches because there's not a spot of magic in them. So if they don't have magic, not that, like I said earlier, we all have it in us, but have they used it? Have they brought it out? But the rules of a Salem witch, this is a little bit different. These are ones that my best friend Sean and I came up with years ago. And the first rule of being a Salem witch, and frankly, this would apply, New Orleans has turned a little bit toxic over the last few years. And it hasn't quite reached Salem at its worst, but Salem's got a lot less toxic because we've all, you be there long enough and you learn, because you get rules. Like the first rule of being a Salem witch, never walk in another witch's flow space. This is also metaphorical. When you and your fellow witch are strolling down the thoroughfare of Salem with your capes, you must stand far enough away from one another to let them billow. And where this is a metaphor also, well, it's literal in Salem because so many of us cape, but it's also metaphorical because you must give the people around you their birth, their chance to shine. You don't try to outshine everybody around you. You try to come together in magic, but in a way that each of us gets to have our solo moment.
Beautiful.
The second rule of being a Salem witch. The best magic wand a witch can own is a great stick of black eyeliner.
Hell yeah.
Now this is also
Now we're talking.
Right.
it's also metaphorical because Salem is more identified with witchcraft than any other place in the world. So media will come constantly looking for witches, and sometimes they get the good ones among us, and sometimes not so much. You know, some of these people I see on the TV shows representing witchcraft, I'm just like, they need you, ladies. That's what they need, not this dregs that I see. You know, and so I always say, you know, be TV ready. Make sure you've got some dress black. Oh, you know, it doesn't have to be black. You know, something that looks interesting. You know, make sure you've got a look ready to go so that we don't just, you know, and I get people, well, why can't we look like everybody else? I used to get criticized by those sundress and flip-flop brown sundress pagans with the tie-dye t-shirts, and why don't I look like them? I'm like, I work in corporate America. You know, when I used to work in ad agencies, I never saw anybody with tie-dye at 400 pounds. I just didn't see this. So I don't want to look like this. But, you know, there is something to be said for dramatic appearance. You know, grabs their attention. Then you got to give them something worth hearing, you know. So that magic wand means be TV ready. Always, number 3 rule of being a Salem witch: always pitch the pointy hat for aerodynamic flow. No one loves a flat-brimmed witch hat. They're ugly looking. This is also, you know, and it sort of goes up like this and flares, and it's like, one of the problems I had with Elphaba in the movie of Wicked is they flattened her hat. Like, it was never flat in the musical. So it just that's why it failed. Well, the first one did well, the second one failed, but it's like, because no one wants a flat brimmed hat. And that's metaphorical also, because the winds change in that city. Today's enemies are tomorrow's friends. You never know who's loyal to who from one minute to the next. And I mean, there are people that are stalwarts, people that are ride or die, but you get a lot of that. The winds are always changing. You better be ready. You have that pointy hat with your aerodynamic flow. The fourth and most, somebody said that's made up. Well, of course it's made up. Do you think this came from some ancient Greek grimoire? Huh?
What? That's my husband.
Oh.
Feel free
to listen to Keith. He's
Yeah,
barely allowed.
I'm making it up. So, but guess what?
No, I meant the pronunciation
Guess what?
of the word,
It
not
worked.
me saying.
Yeah, it works. This is the most important, the fourth rule of being a Salem witch. Now, we all learned this decades ago, because there were times when Laurie and Jody Cabot would get into it, and they would end up at odds. And
I hate to interrupt. Could I interrupt 1 second?
Yeah.
Because it's got a little quieter here, just a smidge. But I wanted to ask your opinion. So back to Winchester for a second.
Yeah, but don't let me forget the fourth rule. It's the most important one.
It's a what?
It's the most important rule. I was giving them the 4 rules.
Okay, go for it then.
Let me give them the 4th rule first. All right, the
Okay.
4th rule. When we used to see Laurie and Jody fight, you know, and whenever they would fight, there was, most people knew we don't want to get involved, you know, but there was always that handful of people that would be like, oh, we hate Jody now, you know. And then when they would make up, Jody would systematically destroy each and every one of these people, cut them out of their mother's life, her mother's life, ruin them in some way if she could, and she was usually good at that. That, you know, I'm like, okay, we all learned that the most important rule of being a Salem witch: never stand between 2 dragons.
Yeah.
For years, people tried to get between my best friend Lorelei, whose Mob Witch comes out in like 3 weeks, who wrote Mob Witch, and she is a mob. Well, she was married to the mob, but it's a Mob Witch. And she and I are the best of friends. But 20 years ago, you'll read in the book, we weren't the best of friends, because people got, you know, they would tell her something, and then they would tell me something, and it was all lies. You know, people want to try to whip people up. And now, of course, you know, we're 20 years knowing, you know, this is all crap. But these people that would stand between us as 2 dragons, or the people that try to get between me and Laurie Cabot, it never ends well for these people. Like, it never. So that's the most important one.
Burn them up.
The pronunciation of the word. I don't know what it means, but the pronunciation of huicha wiche is gendered, so witch. Now, what was your question about
Winchester.
Winchester?
Yeah. So I went to Winchester because I was living in San Francisco Bay Area at the time, and we got put on a behind the scenes tour, and we went up, which I think is the witch's cap that you were talking about in that particular room. They hadn't put it on tours before, but we went up there, and when I got up into that room, everything was spinning. Everything was spinning, and I had to I told my husband I got to get out of here because like I'm gonna faint or something. Everything's spinning in this space. And he said, come out of the room. And as soon as I got out of the room, I stopped feeling that spinning feeling. And I listened, and I don't know if you have any inkling of this, but because maybe you were in that space. But
Did you miss that part when I talked about that room?
I heard it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I'm wondering if you felt or if you picked up on the same thing.
I didn't pick up on spinning, but I picked up on, but remember, what do people do when they do ritual? They often dance in circle.
Oh, that's weird.
So
what we asked the tour guide from the outside of the room, we said, what was this room used for? And they said that was what we believe to be Sarah Winchester's original seance room. And so I wonder if it was.
I didn't know that when I got, because we were already separated from the rest of the team. So it was literally me, Patty, and George, and even the guy with the camera, obviously. And and so we were just like lost. And so we didn't know anything about that room. And I later did hear about the seances, and it wasn't just seances. I said they did rituals in this room. There was magic conducted in this room.
That makes
and magic
sense.
Rituals often involve dancing, spinning. So I didn't pick up on, they were spinning, but I picked up on the ritual. It was kind of the same thing, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
Do you think that she could have opened up a portal? Do you believe that exists?
I don't know that the word portal is, I know that's a popular term. I don't see, do I believe there are certain places where that veil is going to be thinner and can be like a portal? Yes. I avoid overemphasizing it because I think it disconnects us from the knowledge that everywhere we are, there is the potential to be in both worlds. Like I don't suddenly, yes, if I'm in a really sacred space, like Wayland Smithy in the UK was really that for me, where I am literally between the worlds when I'm there. Yes, that I guess is a portal, but my psychic ability doesn't stop when I'm over there at the coffee shop, you know what I mean, down the way. It's, every place is a portal. Now, do I think that she created, I think a better word I might use is a beacon? Do I think that all that work that was done there created so much energy that it's attracted things like what I sensed that was very dark when I was there? Well, absolutely. Absolutely. But I don't, and it's not that I'm down on portal. I don't want to overuse terms. Like I try to avoid terms that might take us away from the understanding, because in the paranormal particularly, I'm not going to go there. I was going to talk about that portal to hell house that I make fun of. I just won't say where it is, Ohio. I'm being catty. Anybody could buy a house and go, you know what? I get demons in my basement. And it's like,
that's it. That's how I'm making my first million.
I'm such too, because we've got that Warren Museum coming to Salem, and a lot of witches are upset, and a lot of other people are upset. And I'm like, well, I'm not upset because, at least 90% of the people coming to Salem are interested in the paranormal. But am I really afraid of some Raggedy Ann doll? No. Do I think that the Warrens overemphasized demons and everything was demonic and devils and, the way they felt about this Ouija board and everything else? Yeah, I think it was ridiculous. And I think that there's, if they did have a legitimate side, and I'll say Lori Cabot always thought they were frauds, and if anyone would know, you know, her psychic ability is that good, you know, but it's it I don't care because they're going to enjoy it. You know, people are going to go to that museum and they're going to love it because it's fun. It's something to do. But I don't go about thinking about demonic forces or even curses. I mean, I have some haters. I've probably had more chickens killed with my name on it than Frank Perdue puts out in a year. I'm still here because I don't think about curses or, you know, I just trust that the protection shield Lori Cabot taught me 36 years ago works. I trust that the other magic that I do in this life for protection, but not in a fear-based way. You know, when we put something in the window as a ward, we're not doing it with the mindset of terror. We're doing it with the mindset of confidence. You know, when I have the Archangel Michael in bronze at my front door, you know, as Michael is older than Judaism and Christianity. It goes back to the Mukla rituals of the ancient Babylonians of fire spirits that would banish harmful magic. You know, I'm not sitting there terrified of what's coming. I'm simply confidently saying we are in a place in a mind of protection. We don't need to live in fear because as witches, we have the birthright to protect ourselves with magic and to better our existence with it. And so we don't need to live in that fear. And I don't. You never hear me going on about, oh, I think someone put a curse on me. I've never, and first of all, my worst haters wouldn't have the talent, which makes me feel bad for the chickens. You know, it's like, I think, you know, how many of these poor chickens had to die because you don't like me? You know, it's like, okay, you know, I'm never going to kill a chicken, but you don't need to kill a chicken. I mean, I get if you're in Haitian voodoo, it's part of the culture and they eat it, you know, so I don't disrespect that.
Yeah.
But I don't need to kill an animal to make magic happen. I never have.
Oh my gosh. I cannot believe we have been together for an hour already.
I know, it's flown by.
Yeah, I could spend like 4 days nonstop with you, Christian, just picking your brain. But before we actually leave tonight, we got one more question. If you could leave every listener with one piece of magical wisdom that could genuinely change the course of their life, what would it be?
Know yourself. That's it.
Mic drop. It's perfect.
I didn't invent that. Nothi Suton, you know, however they say it. I didn't invent it, but I just know it. You know, when you know who you are, you know what you're meant to do, and then you do it. It's like what Crowley called, you know, your high, what, you know, following your will. Do what thou wilt. You know, what does that mean? It means knowing who you are and then doing that, being that. Yeah, know yourself.
And on that note, when
Beautiful.
I heard something recently that was so in line with that was when you're trying to become your highest self, it's not about what you agree to, but it's what you learn to say no to stay authentic to yourself. And that's
there's a lot of knowing that.
Yeah.
When you know yourself, you also know what you don't need or want or are willing to deal with. And trust me, the older you get, the more you get that way. And people are not happy.
Yeah. Well, Christian, this has just been, I don't know, a blessing. You've been an amazing guest, and we definitely need to have you on maybe closer to Samhain or even at Yule. Oh man, I would love to spend Yule with you.
Oh, I can.
Oh my goodness.
Bitch, you know.
Yeah. But my dear sisters, do you have any words of wisdom for our hearth keepers tonight?
Got anything special, Rachel?
Huh?
You got anything special to impart words of wisdom tonight?
No, it's been amazing. Thank you, Christian, so much for coming on. We appreciate you.
Hopefully I'll see you this. I might try to come down. I don't know if they have a vending area or what. Do they have vending or something the public can?
Yes.
Or I'll just buy a ticket. I don't care. I mean, I just don't have time for classes, but I might come down and say hi.
Yeah, no, they have a whole vending area. So yeah, I would love to see you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, ladies.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. My sisters, I love you. Everybody else, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll see you next Thursday at 9 p.m. right here on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe. Find the hype button. The hype button is great for smaller channels. Please help us get the word out there. We love sharing knowledge with you guys, bringing on these special guests like we had tonight. And we love you. Thank you so much. See you soon.